Hi food thangs! Welcome to my channel where we listen to spooky stories and eat some really yummy food together. I'm so excited and I'm also very hungry. As you can see today we have sushi. We have a spicy dynamite roll, some fried tempura, a spicy volcano roll, and some edamame, and a fresh Coke to drink. And today's scary story is about the Smiling Man. Let's get into our first bites. Thank you guys for being here. I'm so grateful to be doing my first video. This is something I've wanted to do for a long time, so let's get into it, guys. Get your favorite snack, get a nice cozy blanket, and let's get freaky, guys. Let's go. Alright guys, let's get into our first story.
About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite. But all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police-patrolled park quite a ways from my apartment. It was quiet, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street on my side was the silhouette of a man, dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance-walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still until I could make out his face. His eyes were open wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off of him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back, and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me but still looking skyward, smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street ahead of me was completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time staring at him, and then he started moving toward me again. He took giant, exaggerated, tiptoed steps, as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone. Except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen, as the smiling man crept toward me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. What came out was a whimper. What? Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around very slowly and started dance-walking away. Just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go, until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way, and this time he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off of the side road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk, he didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a very, very scary thing to see.
Wow, guys. What would you guys do in that situation? And what do you think that was? Was he a real man and he was just maybe psychotic? Or was it something else? Time for the next story.
One night, a man named James was walking home from a friend's house when he noticed a strange figure up ahead. It was a tall, lanky man, dressed in a suit with a wide smile on his face. As James approached, he noticed that the man's smile was a little too wide, stretching unnaturally from ear to ear. The man started to dance, moving in an odd, jerky way, as if he were controlled by strings. James tried to avoid the man, but the smiling man kept following him, matching his every step. The smiling man didn't say anything, but his eyes followed James everywhere he went. James started to run, but the smiling man kept pace with him, his dance becoming more frantic and his smile even wider. James could see that the man's teeth were too long and too sharp. Finally, James reached his house and ran inside, locking the door behind him. As he looked out the window, he saw the smiling man standing outside, still smiling and dancing. For weeks after that, James would see the smiling man lurking in the shadows, watching him from afar. He never spoke, but his presence was enough to terrify James to his core. To this day, no one knows who or what the smiling man was, or why he targeted James. But the memory of his wide, unnerving smile still haunts James, and he can never shake the feeling that the smiling man is still out there, somewhere, waiting for him. James tried to convince himself that it was all in his head, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the smiling man was real, and that he posed a serious threat to him. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, but James still couldn't shake the feeling that the smiling man was watching him. He started to avoid going out after dark, and would always look over his shoulder when he was walking home from work or running errands. One night, James woke up to the sound of a strange scratching noise coming from outside his bedroom window. He got out of bed to investigate, but as he approached the window, he saw the smiling man standing outside, looking up at him with that same unnerving grin. James was frozen with fear, unable to move or scream. He watched in horror as the smiling man started to climb up the side of his house, his long fingers gripping onto the windowsill. Suddenly, James felt a rush of adrenaline. He knew he had to do something to protect himself. He grabbed a nearby lamp and smashed it against the window, shattering the glass and sending the smiling man tumbling back to the ground. James quickly called the police, but by the time they arrived, the smiling man was nowhere to be found. They searched the area, but found no trace of him. Years have passed since that night, but James still has nightmares about the smiling man. He's never been able to fully shake off the feeling of being watched, and he's always on edge, waiting for the smiling man to appear once again. Despite the passage of time, James was never able to find any answers about the smiling man. He searched online and even consulted with experts in the paranormal, but no one could explain who or what the smiling man was or why he was haunting him. Over the years, James developed a deep fear of the dark and became extremely vigilant about his personal safety. He installed security cameras around his house and carried pepper spray with him wherever he went. But even with all of these precautions, James still felt like he was being watched. He would wake up in the middle of the night, convinced that he could see the smiling man's grinning face in the shadows. One day, James was walking home from the grocery store when he felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned around to see a man in a suit, with a wide, friendly smile on his face. At first, James felt a jolt of fear, thinking that the man might be the smiling man in disguise. But as the man started to speak, James realized that he was just a friendly stranger, asking for directions. As James walked away from the encounter, he realized that he had finally conquered his fear of the smiling man. He knew that he might never find out who or what the smiling man was, but he had learned to live with the fear and move on with his life. From that day forward, James felt more confident and secure than he had in years. He still had nightmares about the smiling man from time to time, but he no longer let the fear control him. He had faced his demons and come out stronger on the other side. But just as James thought he had finally overcome his fear, strange things started happening again. He began to receive anonymous phone calls and emails with nothing but a picture of the smiling man attached. He even saw the smiling man outside his office building one day. James didn't know what to do. He thought he had put the smiling man behind him, but it seemed like he was back with a vengeance. James was terrified, but he knew he had to do something to stop the smiling man once and for all. He hired a private investigator to try and track down any information about the smiling man. But after months of searching, they came up empty. The smiling man seemed to be a complete mystery, and James was running out of options. One day, James decided he had had enough. He armed himself with a baseball bat and went out looking for the smiling man. He searched the streets, alleyways, and abandoned buildings, determined to put an end to this once and for all. As the sun began to set, James thought he had lost the trail. He was about to give up when he saw a shadowy figure up ahead. James ran towards the figure, swinging the bat with all his might. But as he got closer, James realized that it wasn't the smiling man. It was just a mannequin, dressed in a suit with a wide, friendly smile on its face. James was confused and disoriented. He didn't know what to make of the mannequin, but he knew that it wasn't the smiling man. He put down the bat and walked away, feeling a sense of relief and closure. From that day forward, James never saw or heard from the smiling man again. He wasn't sure what had happened, but he was glad that it was finally over. He could finally move on with his life, free from the fear and terror that had haunted him for so long. As time passed, James tried to put the memories of the smiling man behind him. He focused on his work and his relationships, trying to rebuild the life that had been disrupted by the terror he had experienced. But even as he moved forward, James couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. He found himself looking over his shoulder more often, always feeling like he was being watched. One day, James received an unexpected package in the mail. It was a small wooden box, with a note attached that simply read, "Open me." James hesitated for a moment, but curiosity got the better of him. He opened the box and saw that it contained a single piece of paper. On the paper was a drawing of a man with a wide, friendly smile. It was the smiling man. James felt a wave of fear wash over him. He didn't know who had sent him the box, but he knew that it was someone who wanted to torment him. Days turned into weeks, and James received more packages, each one containing a new piece of the puzzle. There were photos, drawings, and even a lock of hair that James suspected belonged to the smiling man. James was determined to find out who was behind the packages. He hired a private investigator to try and track down any leads, but they came up empty. The person sending the packages was smart and elusive, always staying one step ahead of James and his team. But one day, James received a breakthrough. The packages suddenly stopped coming, and James was able to trace the sender's location to a small town in the middle of nowhere. James drove to the town, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea what he would find there, but he knew he had to see it through to the end. As he drove through the deserted streets, James saw a figure up ahead. It was the smiling man, standing in the middle of the road, watching him with that same unnerving grin. James stepped out of the car, ready to confront the smiling man once and for all. But as he approached, he realized that the smiling man was just a mannequin, like the one he had seen before. James was confused and disoriented. He didn't understand what was happening or who was behind it all. But as he turned to leave, he saw a shadowy figure up ahead, watching him from a distance. It was a woman, with a wide, friendly smile on her face. It was someone James knew very well. It was his ex-girlfriend. James was shocked to see his ex-girlfriend there. He had no idea what she had to do with the smiling man, or why she would go to such lengths to scare him. As she approached him, James could see that she was different. She seemed almost possessed, her eyes wide and unfocused, her smile too wide and too friendly to be real. "What are you doing here?" James asked her, trying to keep his distance. "I just wanted to see you, James," she said, her voice almost sing-songy. "But why all this? The packages, the mannequins, the smiling man?" James demanded. His ex-girlfriend's smile grew wider, almost stretching her face beyond its limits. "Because I love you, James. I want you to always remember me, to always think of me. And what better way than to make you remember the smiling man?" James took a step back, feeling a cold chill run down his spine. He didn't know what to make of his ex-girlfriend's confession or what it meant for him, but he knew he had to get out of there. He turned and ran back to his car, slamming the door shut behind him. As he drove away, he could see his ex-girlfriend in the rearview mirror, still standing in the middle of the road, watching him with her unnerving smile. James never saw his ex-girlfriend again after that day. He moved away, changed his phone number and email address, and tried to put the memories of the smiling man behind him for good. But even now, years later, James can't shake the feeling that someone is still watching him, waiting for the right moment to strike. The memory of the smiling man still haunts him, reminding him that some fears never truly go away. Despite his best efforts to move on, James found himself constantly on edge, always looking over his shoulder for any sign of the smiling man or his ex-girlfriend. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him, waiting for the right moment to strike. He started seeing a therapist, hoping to work through his fears and put them behind him for good. But even in therapy, he struggled to open up about what had happened to him. The fear was too real, too palpable. As time passed, James started to make progress. He found a new job and started a new relationship, slowly rebuilding the life he had lost. But even as he moved forward, the memories of the smiling man lingered, a constant reminder of the terror he had experienced. One night, James was home alone, watching TV. As he flipped through the channels, he came across a news report about a string of murders that had been happening in the area. The killer was still on the loose, and police were warning people to be vigilant. Suddenly, James heard a noise coming from outside. He muted the TV and listened, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear someone moving around outside, rustling through the bushes. James felt a wave of fear wash over him. Was it the smiling man? His ex-girlfriend? The killer from the news report? He tried to call the police, but his phone was dead. He tried to leave the house, but the front door was stuck shut. And then he heard it. A soft, friendly voice whispering in his ear. "Don't worry, James, it's just me." James turned around, and there she was, his ex-girlfriend with her unnerving smile and her wide, unblinking eyes. "I just wanted to see you again, James," she said, stepping closer. "I've missed you so much." James felt his heart racing. He didn't know what to do or say. He was trapped with nowhere to go. And then he heard another noise, this one coming from outside. It was the sound of footsteps, getting closer and closer. James turned and ran for the back door, desperate to get away. He burst through the door and ran into the night, not stopping until he was miles away. He never saw his ex-girlfriend again after that night, and he never found out who the smiling man was or why he had been targeted. But he knew one thing for sure. Some fears never truly go away, and some nightmares never truly end.
Guys, that was so scary. I almost don't know which story is scarier. I'd probably say the second one, because there's some like black magic involved. Ex-girlfriend, that's scary. Yo, be careful who you end up messing with, okay? And always try to leave on good terms, no matter what. Guys, let me know in the comments which story you thought was scarier. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for being here with me today. I had so much fun. Lord, I hope I never encounter a smiling man, unless it's my man. This is the first of many to come. So please, if you enjoyed that video, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you guys so much. And also, if anyone has any real scary stories, send it to my email, boothangmukbang@gmail.com. Thank you guys so much again, and I'll see you next time.